The Galactic Council had gathered in the Grand Hall, a vast chamber filled with representatives from the galaxy's most powerful species. The air was thick with tension as the fate of Earth hung in the balance. For months, the Council had been negotiating with Earth's leaders, trying to find a way to avoid conflict. Earth's situation had been dire. The Terran warships, though fierce, were vastly outgunned by the combined forces of the Council. The planet had been battered by endless threats from alien fleets, and now, humanity seemed on the brink of defeat. The Council's diplomats were calm and assured, their voices dripping with cold certainty as they outlined the terms of peace. The offer was simple: surrender, and Earth would be spared. It was a generous offer, or so they believed. They were giving Earth a way out, an opportunity to live under the protection of the Galactic Council. In return, Earth would relinquish its sovereignty and join the Council, its leaders becoming just one more cog in the vast, cold machine of intergalactic politics. The room fell silent as the diplomats of the Galactic Council turned their gazes toward the human envoy. The man stood at the center of the chamber, his expression unreadable. His uniform was simple, but it carried the weight of his people's pride. The delegation from Earth had been expected to beg for mercy, to plead for their survival. But instead, the human envoy looked the Council in the eye and delivered a message that no one had anticipated. "We reject your offer," the human diplomat said, his voice calm but firm. For a moment, there was only silence. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap, deafening in their suddenness. The Council's representatives were stunned. The peace they had so carefully crafted, the terms they believed would bring an end to this long and exhausting conflict, had been flatly rejected. The faces of the Council members shifted from confident smiles to shock. They had prepared for many things, but never for this. The head of the Council, a tall, imposing figure with pale blue skin and glowing eyes, was the first to speak. "You refuse our offer?" he asked, his voice thick with disbelief. "Are you truly so foolish? Your warships are outmatched. Your defenses are failing. You are on the brink of annihilation, and yet you reject peace." The human envoy stood his ground, unwavering. "We will not bow to threats, and we will not surrender our world. You have no power over us." The words sent a ripple through the Council members. How could this be? The humans, a species so young, so unrefined in the eyes of the galaxy's greatest powers, were rejecting the very thing they needed to survive. The Council had assumed that Earth's leaders would see reason, that they would recognize their own weakness and bow to the superior strength of the galaxy's oldest and most advanced civilizations. But instead, they had encountered something far more dangerous: pride. Humanity's refusal to surrender was not out of desperation. It was out of defiance. The Council's diplomats exchanged uneasy glances. Some whispered among themselves, unsure of how to proceed. Others looked at the human envoy with growing anger, unable to fathom such a rejection. But the human envoy didn't flinch. His people had suffered for too long, and they would not be ruled by anyone. He knew what was at stake, but he also knew that surrendering would be worse than any war. Humanity had always fought for its survival, and it would not stop now. The head of the Council leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "You are making a grave mistake. Do you think you can defeat us? Do you believe your people stand a chance against the combined might of the Galactic Council?" His voice was icy, but there was a flicker of uncertainty behind his words. He had expected fear, not defiance. "We don't need to defeat you," the human envoy replied. "We only need to survive. And we will." The room was filled with a heavy silence. The Council's confidence had shattered. They had expected this to be a simple negotiation, a way to bring an end to the conflict with minimal effort. But now, they were faced with a human resolve that they had never anticipated. It was as if the very foundations of their arrogance had been shaken, and in their place, there was something far more dangerous: respect. The Council may have been powerful, but humanity had shown them that it was not a species to be underestimated. The human envoy turned to leave, but before he did, he delivered one final message: "We will fight for our freedom, and we will not stop. You may have the power, but we have the will." With that, he walked out of the chamber, leaving the Council to digest the enormity of his words. As the doors closed behind him, the room erupted into chaos. The council members argued among themselves, some calling for immediate retaliation, others urging caution. But it was clear that nothing would ever be the same again. The humans had sent a message, and the galaxy would never forget it. The council, once confident in their control, now faced a future filled with uncertainty. For Earth, this was only the beginning. The rejection of the council's offer was not just an act of defiance, it was a declaration. The galaxy had underestimated humanity, and now they would learn the consequences of that mistake. The Terran warships may have been outgunned, but they were not defeated. And neither was humanity. This was just the beginning of a fight that would change the galaxy forever. The rejection of the Galactic Council's offer echoed throughout the galaxy like a bombshell. The news spread quickly, reaching every corner of the galaxy, from the farthest planets to the core systems where the most powerful civilizations lived. As soon as the human envoy's words had left the chamber, they were broadcast to the entire galaxy. No one had expected such a response from Earth. For generations, humanity had been seen as a fledgling species, struggling to survive in a hostile universe. But now, in an instant, Earth had shown the galaxy something unexpected, a backbone. The Galactic Council, which had long held the power to dictate the fates of countless civilizations, was thrown into disarray. For years, they had seen humanity as weak, primitive, and easily manipulated. They had expected Earth to follow the same path as other civilizations, accepting defeat with dignity and signing a peace treaty that would strip them of their autonomy. But instead, Earth had defied them. The Council's expectations were shattered, and the galaxy was left reeling from the bold refusal. As the news reached the leaders of various alien empires, the response was immediate. On one planet, a powerful alien general smashed his fist into a table, demanding that his fleet be mobilized immediately. The humans are challenging us. This is no longer a simple negotiation. It is a declaration of war. The general's eyes glowed with anger as he turned to his officers, preparing them for action. On another world, the leaders of a peaceful alien species gathered around a holographic display, their faces filled with uncertainty. Why would they reject the Council's offer? One of them asked, confusion evident in his voice. It was a simple peace agreement, a chance for their survival. Why would they turn it down? The answer, however, was clear to everyone in the galaxy who understood the Terrans. The human spirit was not one to be broken. Earth had been knocked down time and time again, yet it always rose again, stronger and more determined than before. It was not the first time humanity had faced overwhelming odds, and it would not be the last. They were a species that refused to go quietly into the night, no matter how powerful their enemies were. Back at the Galactic Council, the situation was growing increasingly tense. The once confident members, who had believed that their offer would be accepted without question, were now turning on each other. Some were advocating for immediate military action, suggesting that Earth's leaders be taught a lesson they would never forget. Others were urging caution, afraid that attacking Earth might lead to a much larger conflict, one that the Council might not be able to control. The humans are more than just a nuisance, one Council member said, his voice dripping with venom. They have made a mockery of the entire galaxy. How dare they reject us? But they're not just any species, another member countered, her voice tinged with fear. Earth's people have a history of surprises. They've already shown us that they will not bend, even when they have no choice. If we strike now, it could set off a chain reaction that we won't be able to stop. As the debate raged on, the rest of the galaxy continued to watch. Every news station, every communication channel, was filled with discussions about the humans' bold rejection. The question on everyone's mind was the same. Why had Earth refused? What did humanity know that the rest of the galaxy didn't? The answer was simple, yet terrifying. Earth had a secret, and that secret was something the Council had completely overlooked. While the galaxy's most powerful fleets and armies had spent years focusing on their own dominance, Earth had been quietly preparing. Their warships, though smaller and fewer in number, were equipped with technology that the galaxy had never seen before. And the human soldiers, though untested on the grand stage, possessed a tenacity and resolve that no one had accounted for. Back on Earth, the leaders of the planet were not resting. They knew what was coming. They had been preparing for years, stockpiling resources and building up their military forces. They had known that the day might come when they would have to stand up against the galaxy's might. And when that day arrived, they would not back down. The rejection of the Galactic Council's offer had been just the beginning of their resistance. The human fleet, led by the Terran warships, was ready. Earth's military had been equipped with advanced weaponry that the Council had never expected. The Terrans had developed new forms of energy weapons, shields that could withstand even the most powerful of alien strikes, and warships that could move faster and more precisely than anything the galaxy had ever seen. These were not the desperate measures of a species on the brink of destruction. No, the humans had been planning for a fight all along. As Earth's leaders watched the unfolding chaos within the Galactic Council, they knew that the battle ahead would not be easy. But they were ready. They had made their decision. They would not surrender. They would not kneel. And they would not be cowed by the overwhelming might of the Galactic Council. In the days that followed, the galaxy remained in a state of confusion. Leaders scrambled to assess what had just happened. Could Earth's rejection of the Council's offer be the beginning of a war that would engulf the entire galaxy? Or had humanity simply been foolish, throwing away their last chance at peace? One thing was certain. The humans had done something that no one had expected. They had changed the game. And the galaxy would never be the same again. The Galactic Council, once so confident in its power, was now left questioning its future. Would they respond with force, risking an all-out war with humanity? Or would they try to negotiate once again, knowing that this time, the terms might be different? The fate of the galaxy hung in the balance, and no one, not even the Council, knew how this would end. The stage was set. The galaxy's most powerful beings had underestimated humanity. And now, it was time for Earth to show them what it truly meant to stand strong in the face of overwhelming odds. As the shockwaves from Earth's rejection of the Galactic Council's peace offer spread across the galaxy, the situation grew more complicated by the hour. The Council, once united in their belief that the human race would bow to their superior power, found themselves grappling with an unexpected and dangerous new reality. The humans had done what no one thought possible. They had defied the Council's might. But the rejection was not the end of the story. It was merely the beginning of a far greater struggle. In the vast chambers of the Galactic Council, the debate continued. The once confident, almost arrogant voices of the Council members had been replaced by cautious whispers and angry outbursts. The offer, which they believed would bring about a peaceful resolution to the conflict, now lay in ruins. Some Council members argued that immediate military action was necessary. They believed that Earth's refusal was an insult, a challenge that could not be allowed to stand. Others, however, were not so certain. They feared that an attack on Earth would ignite a war that could spiral out of control, one that would stretch their forces thin and potentially destroy everything they had built. But in the midst of all this chaos, one thing remained clear. Humanity had outplayed them. The Galactic Council, for all its power and influence, had failed to anticipate the spirit and determination of Earth's leaders. Humanity had shown them that they would not be intimidated. But why? What was it that made the humans so certain that they could face the might of the galaxy? The answer lay in the secrecy that Earth had kept hidden for years. While the Galactic Council had been focused on maintaining control over their territories, they had failed to notice the subtle buildup of humanity's strength. Earth had known that the galaxy's most powerful empires were watching them, waiting for the right moment to strike. They had anticipated the Council's peace offer and had prepared for this very moment. Earth had not just been waiting for the storm to pass. They had been preparing for war. The Terran warships, though far fewer in number, were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Their designs were sleek and powerful, built with advanced technology that far surpassed anything the Council had encountered. These ships weren't just powerful, they were smart. The Terran engineers had created warships that could think for themselves, capable of analyzing battle conditions in real time and adjusting their strategies on the fly. The fleet's weapons systems were just as advanced, utilizing energy-based projectiles and defense shields that could absorb and redirect incoming fire. Even the alien species with the most powerful fleets had never seen anything like it. But it wasn't just the technology that made Earth's military a formidable force, it was the humans themselves. The soldiers and pilots who flew these ships were not just trained warriors. They were survivors. Humanity had been through countless wars, struggles, and disasters, and each time they had come out stronger. The Terrans had learned to adapt, to innovate, and to fight back against impossible odds. It was this resilience, this unyielding spirit, that had made Earth a force to be reckoned with. Back on Earth, the leaders were already making their plans. The rejection of the Galactic Council's offer had been calculated, a move that would set the stage for a series of actions that would leave the galaxy reeling. Earth's leaders knew they could not face the full might of the Galactic Council's fleets head-on, not yet. But they also knew that they could not simply back down. The battle for Earth's survival had already begun, and they had no intention of losing. The human fleet, though outnumbered, was strategically positioned. They had hidden their warships in the asteroid fields surrounding their home planet, and many more had been stationed on the outskirts of their solar system, ready to strike. But Earth's military was not acting in desperation. They were waiting for the right moment. They had learned that patience, when coupled with preparation, was one of the most powerful weapons in any conflict. Humanity would not charge blindly into battle. They would strike only when the time was right, when the Galactic Council's arrogance had led them to make a critical mistake. The Council, however, was growing impatient. Some members, frustrated by their inability to bring the humans to their knees, began pushing for a more aggressive approach. They called for immediate strikes on Earth's most vulnerable targets. But others, who had begun to see the magnitude of their mistake, urged caution. They had not expected humanity to be prepared for war, let alone capable of rejecting their offer without hesitation. To attack Earth now would be to unleash a war that no one could predict the outcome of. As tensions grew, both on Earth and within the Council, the stage was set for the next phase of the conflict. The first moves had been made, but the galaxy had no idea what humanity had in store. Earth's leaders had known that they would not be able to rely on diplomacy or appeasement to survive. They had been preparing for this day for years, quietly building up their forces, creating new technologies, and training their soldiers in the art of warfare. And now, with the rejection of the Galactic Council's offer, Earth had shown that it was no longer a weak and fragile species, it was a force to be reckoned with. The Council's members continued to argue, but one thing became clear: they were no longer in control. The rejection had shifted the power dynamic, and humanity had just made their first major move on the galactic chessboard. The question was no longer whether Earth would survive. It was whether the Galactic Council would be able to maintain their stranglehold on the galaxy. For the first time, the galaxy's most powerful beings were forced to consider the possibility that they might not be the ultimate authority. And that was something none of them were prepared for. Meanwhile, Earth's leaders were already formulating their next steps. They knew that the path ahead would be difficult, and that the road to victory would be long. But they also knew that they were not alone. The entire galaxy had been watching, and humanity's bold rejection of the Council's peace offer had sparked something within the other civilizations. The galaxy's power structures were shifting, and Earth was at the center of it all. The Council might have thought they had everything under control, but Earth's rejection had proven one thing beyond doubt. Humanity was no longer a weak, insignificant species. They had shown the galaxy that they were willing to fight for their freedom. And as the rest of the galaxy watched, they would soon learn that humanity's fight was only just beginning as the galaxy reeled from the shocking rejection of the Galactic Council's peace offer. The situation was becoming more tense by the day. The Council, once filled with pride and confidence in its ability to control the galaxy, now found itself grappling with an unexpected and dangerous new reality. Earth was no longer a meek, defenseless planet. Humanity had defied them, and in doing so, they had not only demonstrated resilience but also intelligence and preparation. Now, the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance, and no one, not even the Council, knew how it would end. The human fleet, though small compared to the mighty armadas of the Galactic Council, was now a symbol of defiance. Hidden in the asteroid fields surrounding Earth's solar system, the Terran warships had remained in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. But the time for hiding was over. The Council had grossly underestimated humanity, assuming that they were too primitive to pose a serious threat. Now, the Council was about to face the full force of humanity's retaliation. The first wave of human warships emerged from their secret positions, appearing like ghosts in the vast emptiness of space. Their designs were sleek and sophisticated, unlike anything the Council had encountered before. The Terran warships were smaller, but they were fast, agile, and equipped with state-of-the-art weapons systems that outclassed anything the Council had ever seen. Each ship was a fortress, bristling with energy weapons capable of slicing through shields and armor like a hot knife through butter. The human fleet was not just fighting for survival. It was fighting for its right to exist in a galaxy that had long overlooked its strength. The Council's fleets, still reeling from the shock of Earth's rejection, were caught off guard. The first human warships attacked with lightning speed, striking at the Council's weakest ships with deadly precision. The Council's commanders scrambled to respond, but they were unprepared for the human fleet's tactics. The Terran ships moved like shadows, attacking and retreating before the Council could react. They struck hard and fast, targeting vital systems on the enemy ships and crippling their ability to retaliate. The Council had never faced anything like this. Their fleets, vast and powerful, were struggling to adapt to the lightning-fast strikes of the human fleet. Every time the Council sent reinforcements, the humans were already gone, their ships disappearing back into the asteroid fields or jumping to a new location before the Council could regroup. The human tactics were unlike anything the Council had seen before. It wasn't just about strength, it was about cunning. The humans fought with a brutal efficiency, using the environment to their advantage and turning every battle into a deadly game of cat and mouse. The Council's commanders grew increasingly frustrated. They had sent their most advanced warships to crush the Terran fleet, yet time and time again, they were outmaneuvered and outgunned. What was worse, the humans were not just fighting for survival, they were fighting with purpose. Each victory they won sent a shockwave through the galaxy, and with each passing day, more and more species began to question the Council's ability to maintain control. The Galactic Council's long-standing dominance over the galaxy was now under serious threat, and they knew it. But the human fleet was not invincible. Despite their advanced technology and superior tactics, the Terran ships were still outnumbered. They had made the decision to fight with everything they had, but they knew that eventually, the Council would bring more forces to bear. Earth's leaders had anticipated this, and they had prepared for it. They knew that this war would not be won in a single battle, but through perseverance and relentless strikes against the Council's forces. They had already begun to disrupt the Council's supply lines and communication systems, cutting off their ability to coordinate large-scale attacks. The Council might have the numbers, but the humans had something far more dangerous: the will to fight. While the battle in space raged on, Earth's leaders were making their next moves. They knew that their fleet, though strong, could not hold out forever against the sheer might of the Council's forces. But they had other weapons at their disposal. The human resistance was not confined to the battlefield. It was in every corner of Earth. The people of Earth, from the bustling cities to the quiet countryside, had rallied behind their military. They were no longer just spectators in a war. They were active participants. Volunteers were pouring in from every part of the world, offering their skills, resources, and support to the fight. The people of Earth had always been survivors, and now they were fighting alongside their military to protect the planet from the Council's wrath. The Council, however, was not blind to the shifting tides. Behind closed doors, the Galactic Council's leadership was in disarray. The once united front had fractured into factions, each with its own ideas about how to deal with the growing threat of Earth. Some argued that Earth's defiance could be quelled with a decisive, overwhelming attack. Others warned that such an attack would only escalate the conflict and risk losing the support of other galactic civilizations. The Council had once thought of Earth as a mere pawn, easily controlled. But now, they were realizing that humanity was no mere pawn. It was a force that could not be easily manipulated or destroyed. The Council's indecision was becoming their greatest weakness. They could not afford to let the war drag on indefinitely. The Terran fleet was proving to be more resilient and resourceful than they had ever imagined. And now, with alien factions beginning to turn their backs on the Council, the pressure was mounting. Some Council members feared that Earth's defiance would spark a rebellion that could unravel the very fabric of the galactic order they had worked so hard to establish. Meanwhile, Earth's leaders were carefully calculating their next move. They knew that while the battle for Earth was crucial, it was just the beginning. They had to ensure that the galaxy understood their message. Humanity would no longer be subjugated. But they also knew that they couldn't fight forever. The war needed to end on their terms. And so, they devised a bold plan. A plan that would not only secure Earth's survival but would also send a clear message to the rest of the galaxy that Earth was not to be trifled with. In the heart of Earth's military command center, a group of high-ranking officers huddled around a large holographic display. The plan was risky, but it was the only way to ensure that the Council would think twice before ever challenging Earth again. The plan involved a massive offensive, a strike at the heart of the Council's supply lines, crippling their ability to wage war. It would be a high-risk, high-reward maneuver, one that would require precision and timing. But Earth's leaders were confident that it would work. They had the element of surprise on their side, and they had already demonstrated that they could outsmart the Council at every turn. As the war raged on, Earth's people continued to fight with unwavering determination. The Council's fleets, though vast and powerful, were slowly being chipped away by the relentless human attacks. The tide of the war was turning, and the once confident Galactic Council was beginning to realize that Earth was no longer just a helpless planet on the brink of extinction. It was a force that could change the course of the galaxy. The battle for Earth had become a symbol of defiance, a beacon of hope for those who had been oppressed by the Council's rule. The galaxy was watching, and as Earth's warships struck again and again, it became clear that the Council's reign of terror was coming to an end. But the war was far from over, and Earth's leaders knew that the real test was yet to come. The final push was approaching, and with it, the chance to truly rewrite the galaxy's future. The war for Earth had reached its most critical juncture. The Galactic Council, once the dominant power in the galaxy, was now facing an existential crisis. The Terran forces had not only survived, they had thrived. What had begun as a series of quick, devastating strikes by the human fleet had evolved into a full-scale rebellion that was shaking the foundations of the Council's authority. Earth, the planet that had once been seen as weak, was now a symbol of resistance, and the rest of the galaxy was watching closely to see which side would prevail. In the days following the initial rejection of the Council's peace offer, the human military had become a well-oiled machine, each ship and soldier working in perfect harmony. The Terran warships, though small compared to the Council's behemoth fleets, had proven themselves to be deadly. The human strength lay not just in their advanced technology, but in their ingenuity and their ability to adapt. Every battle, every confrontation had taught them something new. They had learned to use their surroundings, their limited resources, and their tactics to their advantage, turning every disadvantage into an opportunity. The Council, once so sure of its supremacy, was now facing a determined, unpredictable enemy. The Council, realizing that their fleets were being systematically dismantled, had begun to send reinforcements. However, every time they attempted to push their forces forward, the humans would strike swiftly and retreat before the Council could muster a proper response. Earth's fleet had become a shadow, slipping through the cracks of the Council's defenses, targeting key supply lines, communication networks, and military outposts. Slowly but surely, the Council was losing control of the situation. It was a war of attrition, and the Council was beginning to understand the magnitude of the mistake they had made. They had underestimated humanity's resolve, and now they were paying the price. The once proud galactic empire was starting to crumble under the weight of its own arrogance. The alien species that had once bowed to the Council's will were now beginning to question their alliances. Earth's bold defiance had ignited a spark of rebellion in the hearts of many. No longer did the galaxy look at Earth as a weak, defenseless planet. Now, Earth was a symbol of defiance, a beacon of hope for those who had suffered under the Council's tyranny. Meanwhile, Earth's leaders were not content to sit back and wait for the Council to fall. They knew that the war would not be won by small victories alone. They needed to strike a decisive blow that would cripple the Council's ability to continue the war. And so, they put into motion a bold and daring plan. One that would change the course of the war and, quite possibly, the fate of the entire galaxy. The plan was as risky as it was brilliant. Earth's leaders had discovered a key vulnerability in the Council's military infrastructure. The Central Command Hub, located on one of the most heavily guarded planets in the galaxy. This hub coordinated the movements of the entire Council fleet, and if it were destroyed, the Council's military forces would be left in disarray. Without the hub, the Council would be unable to launch coordinated strikes, leaving them vulnerable to further attacks. The only problem was that the planet was surrounded by an impenetrable defense grid, and infiltrating it would require a level of precision and timing that was almost impossible. But Earth had something that the Council didn't: the element of surprise. The human fleet had been studying the Council's movements for months, learning their tactics, understanding their weaknesses, and waiting for the right moment to strike. It was a high-risk maneuver, but it was the only chance Earth had to deliver a crippling blow to the Council and force them into a position where they would have no choice but to negotiate a true peace. The plan was set into motion. A small group of elite Terran ships, specially designed for stealth and speed, would penetrate the Council's defenses and make their way to the heart of the command hub. They would infiltrate the planet's atmosphere, avoiding detection by the Council's advanced sensors, and strike at the core of the military infrastructure. It was a suicide mission for many, but the human fleet had made it clear that no sacrifice would be too great in the fight for Earth's freedom. The countdown began. The Terran warships, cloaked in the shadows of space, moved into position, their crews working in near perfect harmony. The human soldiers aboard these ships had been trained for this moment, their resolve hardened by the brutal reality of the war. They knew that this mission could very well be their last, but they also knew that the future of humanity depended on their success. The entire galaxy was watching, and Earth's leaders had no intention of failing. As the human fleet approached the planet, the tension was palpable. The Council's defense grid was formidable, but the humans had planned every move, every angle of attack. The Terran ships entered the atmosphere, their shields absorbing the intense pressure of entry. The Council's defense systems were on high alert, but the humans had anticipated this. They used the planet's own natural resources, dense asteroid fields and electromagnetic storms, to mask their movements. The Council's sensors, sophisticated as they were, could not detect the Terran ships as they weaved their way through the atmosphere, getting closer to the central hub with every passing second. The human fleet's stealth operation was a marvel of precision. Every ship moved as part of a perfectly synchronized unit, slipping past the Council's defenses like ghosts in the night. The tension in the command center of Earth's military was almost unbearable. The entire war, the survival of the human race, was hanging on the success of this mission. One mistake, one misstep, and the entire fleet would be exposed. Finally, the moment arrived. The human ships reached the core of the command hub, and the assault began. The Terran warships unleashed a barrage of energy weapons, targeting the planet's primary defense systems and key infrastructure. The Council's forces scrambled to respond, but they were too late. The Terran fleet was already dismantling their defenses, one layer at a time. The humans had taken them by surprise, and now, the Council was left struggling to maintain control. Inside the heart of the command hub, chaos erupted. The Council's leaders watched in horror as their prized defense system crumbled under the relentless assault. The human fleet had struck faster and harder than anyone could have imagined. The core of the command hub, once thought to be indestructible, was now in flames. The tide of the war was shifting in real time. The Galactic Council, for the first time, was faced with a threat they could not ignore. As the core of the Council's military infrastructure collapsed, the rest of the galaxy watched in stunned silence. The humans had done the impossible. The Council, once so sure of its dominance, was now on the brink of collapse. Earth's strike had not only crippled their military, but had sent a shockwave throughout the galaxy. The human fleet had shown that they were not just survivors. They were warriors, capable of taking on the might of the galaxy's most powerful empires and emerging victorious. The Council was stunned. They had underestimated Earth, and now they were paying the price. The war for Earth was far from over, but the humans had just delivered the most decisive blow yet. The Council's grip on the galaxy was slipping, and humanity had proven that they would never be silenced. For Earth, this was the moment they had been waiting for. The galaxy had underestimated them, but now, it was clear that humanity was a force that could not be ignored. The battle for Earth was not just a fight for survival. It was a fight for the future of the galaxy itself. The Council had been caught off guard, and the humans were ready to finish what they had started. The war had taken a dark turn, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The war for Earth had reached its tipping point, and the tides had irrevocably turned. Humanity's audacious strike against the Galactic Council's command hub had dealt a blow so severe that the very foundations of the Council's authority were now in jeopardy. The once unshakable leaders of the Galactic Council, who had believed their power was absolute, were now scrambling to preserve what little control they had left. Earth, the planet they had long underestimated, had become the single greatest threat to their empire. The fight for Earth was no longer just a rebellion, it was a revolution. The aftermath of the Terran warship strike against the Council's military infrastructure reverberated throughout the galaxy. The Council's defensive systems, once regarded as impregnable, had been torn apart with brutal precision. In one fell swoop, humanity had not only crippled the Council's ability to coordinate military action, but they had also sent a clear message to the rest of the galaxy. Earth would no longer be a pawn in the galactic game. It would be a player, a force to be reckoned with. The effects of the attack were immediate. The Council's leadership was thrown into disarray. Their once formidable fleet, spread thin across the galaxy, was now crippled, unable to respond effectively to the growing threat. The Terran fleet, though still vastly outnumbered, had used their superior tactics, technology, and the element of surprise to achieve the impossible. With their central command in ruins, the Council's ships were now scattered, isolated, and vulnerable to continued strikes by humanity's forces. As word of the Terran victory spread, the galaxy watched in stunned silence. Many of the alien species that had once pledged allegiance to the Galactic Council were now rethinking their positions. The Veridans, a peaceful race who had been quietly oppressed by the Council for centuries, saw the destruction of the Council's military infrastructure as a sign of hope. Secretly, they began offering support to the human resistance, providing them with information and resources that would prove invaluable in the coming days. The Votarii, a fierce warrior race that had long served as one of the Council's enforcers, began to question their loyalty. While the Votarii were known for their pride in battle, they had never truly agreed with the Council's methods. Now, seeing Earth's fierce resistance and the Council's crumbling empire, some of their leaders began to privately contact the human fleet, offering their tactical expertise and assistance. The word was spreading. Earth was not alone. Yet, for all the signs of disarray within the Galactic Council, the war was far from over. The Council's most powerful members, those who had long held the reins of the galaxy, were determined to retaliate. They could not afford to let Earth's victory stand. The message Earth had sent, to reject their terms, to fight back, to show that they would not bend, was an affront to everything the Council stood for. The war was no longer just about Earth's survival. It had become about maintaining the Council's dominance over the galaxy, and they would stop at nothing to crush the human resistance. In the hidden chambers of the Galactic Council, the debate raged. Some called for immediate, overwhelming retaliation. "We must strike Earth with everything we have," one of the Council's senior members argued. "This is an act of defiance that cannot go unpunished. If we allow them to get away with this, the entire galaxy will lose faith in our power." But others, more cautious, warned against such a reckless course. "If we attack Earth without careful planning, we risk total destruction," another Council member countered. "We've already lost the central hub, and our fleets are vulnerable. The human fleet has proven more capable than we anticipated. If we overextend, we may find ourselves fighting on multiple fronts." In the end, the Council's decision was made. They would attempt one final, decisive strike against Earth, one that would cripple humanity's ability to resist once and for all. They would assemble a fleet, larger than any the galaxy had ever seen, and launch an all-out assault on Earth. They would overwhelm the human forces and force Earth's surrender. The Council believed this would be their last chance to preserve their power. They could not afford to lose again. But what the Council failed to understand was the magnitude of the mistake they were making. The Terran fleet, though smaller in number, was built on the same principle that had driven humanity to thrive: survival. Earth's people had faced far worse odds than this, and each time, they had come out stronger. The human spirit was indomitable, and now, Earth's leaders were preparing for the fight of their lives. Behind the scenes, Earth's leaders were already mobilizing. They had known that this moment would come, that the Council would not accept defeat gracefully. They had already begun to prepare for the Council's counterattack. Their intelligence networks, now operating at full capacity, had intercepted Council communications, learning of the impending assault. Humanity was ready. The Terran fleet had been reinforced, not just with new warships, but with fresh soldiers, new technologies, and advanced tactics. Earth's engineers had worked tirelessly to develop new weapons systems, ones capable of dealing a devastating blow to the Council's massive warships. Meanwhile, the human resistance across the galaxy had grown stronger. The Veridans and the Votarii had sent reinforcements, and a growing number of alien civilizations were joining the fight against the Council. What had started as a rebellion was now a full-fledged galactic war. As the countdown to the Council's final assault began, Earth's leaders knew that this would be their moment of truth. The human fleet, though still outnumbered, would strike with everything they had. They had one chance to turn the tide in their favor. The Council's forces, vast and powerful as they were, would soon face the full might of a united humanity, and a galaxy that was starting to realize that Earth was no longer a weak planet, but a force to be reckoned with. The final battle was approaching. The human fleet, bolstered by their allies and driven by an unyielding will to survive, was preparing to face the Council's greatest assault. Earth's leaders had no illusions. The battle would be fierce, and many would fall. But in that moment, they understood one thing: Earth was no longer fighting just for survival. They were fighting for their place in the galaxy, and they would not back down. As the stars above Earth began to glow brighter, the stage was set for the greatest battle the galaxy had ever seen. The fate of Earth, and the fate of the galaxy, hung in the balance. The Galactic Council had underestimated humanity before, and now they were about to learn the true cost of their arrogance. The war for Earth was far from over, and the final outcome was still uncertain. But one thing was clear: the galaxy would never be the same again. The final moments of the battle for Earth were upon them, and the galaxy held its breath. The Galactic Council, once an unstoppable force that ruled with an iron grip, was now staring into the abyss, unable to retreat. They had underestimated Earth and humanity's ability to fight back, and now, they were on the verge of losing everything. The stakes had never been higher. Earth's fate, and the fate of the entire galaxy, hung in the balance. The Terran fleet had been reinforced, strengthened by the courage and resolve of their people, and bolstered by the alliances they had formed with other alien species who had come to recognize the Council's tyranny. The Veridans, once oppressed by the Council, the Votarii, once their enforcers, and many others were now fighting alongside Earth. The human fleet was no longer a mere rebellion. It had become the vanguard of a galaxy-wide revolution. The Council, seeing its power crumble, had gathered all its remaining forces for one final, massive assault on Earth. The countdown to the battle was like the ticking of a time bomb. The Council's forces, a gargantuan fleet of warships, had gathered in the far reaches of space, preparing for their ultimate strike. These ships, bristling with advanced weaponry and armor, outnumbered the human fleet by a factor of 10. The Council believed that this final battle would break humanity's spirit, crushing their resistance once and for all. But what the Council failed to realize was that Earth's people had already endured the impossible. The humans had been pushed to the brink, but they had refused to break. They had rejected peace, defied the Council's offer, and now, they were poised to deliver a decisive blow. The Terran fleet, despite being outnumbered, was prepared to fight with everything they had. The human spirit, forged in the fires of war and hardship, was the most powerful weapon they possessed. Earth was not simply defending its world. It was fighting for its very existence in the galaxy. The battle began with a sudden, deafening explosion. The Council's ships advanced, their weapons firing in unison as they launched the first salvo at Earth's defenses. The human fleet, anticipating the assault, immediately retaliated. The Terran warships, agile and fast, darted through space, dodging the barrage of enemy fire with expert precision. Each ship struck swiftly, targeting the Council's weakest points, using their advanced energy weapons to tear through shields and armor. Earth's fleet was not fighting for survival alone. They were fighting for a future where they would no longer be dictated to, a future where they would not bow to the will of the Council. The battlefield was a chaotic spectacle of flashing lights, explosions, and the deafening roar of energy weapons clashing in space. The Council's fleet was vast, but the Terran warships fought with unparalleled determination. Every human ship, every soldier, every pilot, was focused on a singular goal: to ensure that Earth would not be crushed under the Council's boot. Despite their smaller numbers, the human fleet struck with ruthless efficiency. Each victory, each destroyed enemy ship, sent a powerful message throughout the galaxy. Earth was not done, and they would not fall easily. As the battle raged on, the Council's leadership grew frantic. They had never expected the humans to be this formidable, this relentless. Their fleets, despite their overwhelming numbers, were struggling to keep up with the human warships. The Terran fleet's mobility and tactics, honed through years of fighting for their survival, were proving to be far more effective than the Council had ever anticipated. What had once seemed like a sure victory for the Council was now slipping through their fingers. On Earth, the military command centers were filled with tension. The war was reaching its climax, and every decision, every move, was critical. The human fleet's commanders, some of the most battle-hardened leaders in history, were coordinating the defense with incredible precision. But even they knew that the final outcome of this battle was uncertain. The Council had the numbers, the firepower, but humanity had something far more powerful: the will to survive. And as the battle unfolded, that will was becoming clearer than ever. The Council's ships, desperate to turn the tide in their favor, began to concentrate their firepower on Earth's capital ships, massive vessels that served as the backbone of the Terran fleet. But the humans were ready. Earth's engineers had developed new defensive technologies, energy shields that were capable of withstanding the Council's heaviest fire. The capital ships, though taking heavy damage, held strong, allowing the smaller Terran warships to continue their strikes. Earth's fleet had evolved into something far more than just a fighting force. It was a symbol of resilience. The tide of the battle began to shift. With every passing moment, the Council's forces were being pushed back. The human fleet, though battered, refused to yield. The Terran commanders executed their final phase of the plan: an all-out assault on the Council's flagship, the Supremacy, a gargantuan warship that commanded the entire fleet. If Earth could take down the Supremacy, the rest of the Council's forces would lose their cohesion and be unable to mount any further organized resistance. It was a bold and risky move, but the humans knew they had no other choice. They had to strike at the heart of the Council's power. The Supremacy towered over the battlefield, its massive guns firing relentlessly at the human ships. It was an imposing sight, but the humans had already made their move. A group of elite Terran warships, led by the Eagle's Fury, the flagship of the Terran fleet, broke through the Council's defenses and charged toward the Supremacy. The battle was fierce, but the Terran ships, determined to end the war once and for all, pressed forward with unmatched courage. As the human fleet closed in on the Supremacy, the final push was underway. With a coordinated strike, the Terran warships launched a barrage of concentrated firepower at the Supremacy's weak points. The massive warship, though heavily armored, was not invulnerable. The human fleet had spent months studying the Supremacy, identifying the exact spots where a well-placed shot could bring it down. The first strike hit its engines, crippling its ability to maneuver. Another hit its main weapons systems, rendering it defenseless. The Supremacy was no longer the unstoppable force it had once been. In a final, desperate attempt to escape, the Supremacy tried to flee, but the Terran fleet was already upon it. With one final, devastating shot, the Supremacy exploded in a brilliant burst of light, sending shockwaves through space. The Council's command structure had been obliterated. The battle, once thought to be their victory, had turned into their defeat. The humans had done the impossible. Earth, against all odds, had prevailed. The Council's fleet, scattered and leaderless, was in full retreat. The battle for Earth was over, but the war had changed the galaxy forever. The humans had shown that they were no longer a weak species to be overlooked or manipulated. They had proven their strength, their resilience, and their ability to fight back against the most powerful empire the galaxy had ever known. As Earth's warships returned to their home planet, the galaxy watched in awe. The once untouchable Galactic Council had been defeated by a species that had been underestimated, ignored, and pushed to the brink of annihilation. Humanity had won, but the victory came at a great cost. Many lives had been lost, countless sacrifices had been made, but Earth had secured its place in the galaxy. The war was over, but the consequences would echo throughout the galaxy for generations to come. The Council's reign had ended, and a new era was beginning. Earth had not only fought for its survival, it had fought for a galaxy where no species would be ruled by fear, where the will of the people would be respected, and where strength would no longer be defined by the size of one's fleet, but by the courage of one's heart. Humanity had won, and the galaxy would never be the same again.